2, 1. Hey everybody. Hi. Happy Thursday. I hope y'all are super excited to join Power to Fly for another amazing chat and learn. As we get going here, I just want to say hi and welcome. If you are new to us, I'm so excited that you are here to join us, and hopefully you're as excited as I am to talk to Andrea today and learn some more about Moody's. Now, before we get going, I just want to highlight a couple quick housekeeping items for anybody who, again, might be a new joiner. If you're a frequent flyer with Power to Fly, then this will be old hat for you, but I'll try and get through it quickly so we can obviously get into the meat and potatoes of today's session. So like all of our virtual events, these sessions and these chat and learns are all about you. They're all about our community members and making sure that if you took time out of your day to spend with Power to Fly, that the time that you spend with us is well worth it. So you're more than welcome to participate. We encourage you to do that in a number of different ways. You can always come off mute and ask questions via audio. You don't have to have your cameras on, but you're more than encouraged to do so. We highly encourage and welcome messy buns, non-traditional coworkers or non-traditional workspaces, furry coworkers, we just kind of want to make sure we meet you where you are. So no need to be Insta perfect. We're more than happy to see your smiling maskless faces in whatever state you are. Now, if you do come off mute to ask a question or comment, you will show up on the live recording as well as the live stream of today's event. Now, if there's any kind of privacy concerns for you, do not sweat it. You don't have to worry about it. As long as you don't come off mute, you won't show up. You can still participate by putting questions into the Zoom group chat. Or if you have, if you want your question raised, but you want to stay anonymous for whatever reason, just DM me. The account that you're going to want to DM so I get to see them is, let's see, it should be Power to Fly Chat and Learn. So make sure that that's where you send your DMs if you want your question or comment raised, but you want to keep yourself anonymous. Like I said, today's session is being recorded. So we are going to, if you like, kind of want to listen in, it's nice so that you don't have to feel like you need to take notes. And everybody that registered for today's session, regardless of whether you join us or not, even if you join for 5 minutes and leave, everyone will get an email in about 1 to 2 business days. So I would think they'll probably come Monday, with a link to where you can rewatch this recording on our Power to Fly website. Now, if Andrea says something just mind-blowing today and you cannot wait 2 days to share it with a coworker or a friend or a relative, you don't have to wait. You can always check out you can always head over to our Power to Fly YouTube channel. We have a chat and learn channel just dedicated to hosting the videos from these events. We're live streaming there right now, but we will also be, the video from today's chat will also be posted to that channel, usually within about 5 to 15 minutes at the end of today's session. So you can always head over there to rewatch or share the link if you'd like to do it sooner than waiting for that email from Power to Fly. Like I said, you can always write into the Zoom chat if you have questions. I'm happy to help you if you got troubleshooting issues, whatever, please let me know. And last but not least, I talked a little bit about our YouTube channel, but I also want to highlight that if you would like to follow us on our YouTube channel, it's a great way to make sure that you don't miss events like this. But you can also follow us on other social media platforms as well. We are at Power to Fly on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And you can find out all kinds of information about a variety of our always free resources on those different channels as well. So hopefully you will let other people know. You can always take video or photo as we go today and share it on social, because if it's not on social media, did it really even happen? So you're more than welcome to do that. Just let people know that you are learning with Power to Fly today. We're happy to share the resources and enlarge our community and help more people through their career journeys. So super excited to tell you all about that. Now, before we introduce you to our amazing speaker, I just want to highlight that Andrea is here today on behalf of Moody's. Moody's Corporation is this great partner. We're so excited to be partnering with them for this event, but we want to make sure that y'all understand where you can go to get more information about that. So I'm going to send a link through in the chat here in just a moment, and that'll take you to Moody's Power to Fly page on powertofly.com. So it's going to look like the screen you're seeing here. This is where you can look at, you can get more information about the company. You can take a look at events. So that'll show you recordings of past events that we have, that we've worked with Moody's on. It'll also show you upcoming events. So like today's chat, that you can register for in advance. So it'll show you what Moody's is, kind of has in the works with us in the future. The other thing, obviously, is a big one is open jobs. So you can click on that open jobs page, you can, or that tab, you can then see all the open roles that Moody's has posted with us. You can search within them from there. It's a great tool. If you are at, the other thing I want to highlight is that at the top of this page is going to be a big pink follow button. If you are actively job seeking and interested in Moody's, or if you are not actively job seeking, but want to make sure that you kind of remember Moody's when you do start to look around for your next opportunity, I really recommend you hit that follow button. It's going to put you on Moody's follow network. So it'll tell them that you're interested in working with them even before you fill out an application, but it's also going to keep Moody's on your radar by letting you know when they post new roles. So it's an especially great feature if you are actively searching and interested in Moody's, but maybe don't see a role that super fits you right now. It's a really great tool to a tool to use. So like I said, I'll share that with y'all in the chat here in just a moment. But as we get into our speaker, I'm really excited to introduce you all to Andrea Blackman. Andrea leads Moody's ESG Solutions Group, which houses their sustainable finance capabilities and works alongside Moody's Investor Service as well as Moody's Analytics. Now, Andrea has over 30 years of experience in financial services, including leadership roles with banks, asset managers, and vendors, harnessing financial and technological innovation to build successful businesses. In her former role, Andrea led the transformation of CreditView, which was Moody's flagship research, data, and analytics platform, and led it into the leading solution serving credit market professionals worldwide. Andrea, we are so happy to have you join us today, and your resume and your about panel info is absolutely super impressive. Is there anything that you'd like to share with our audience before, about your background or your connection to the chat subject today, before we jump into questions?
No, not specifically. Let's go straight into the questions.
All right, sounds good. So one thing I want to highlight before we jump into the questions here is these are some of the principal themes that we're going to try and cover.
Meg,
you're on mute.
That's what I get for trying to be fancy and see different things during the chat. My fault, ladies. Thank you for the heads up. So these are some of the principal themes that we've identified for today's conversation. Now, these are based on the questions that y'all submitted prior, but also we want to make sure that everybody's aware that if you took time out of your day to spend with us, we want to make sure that your question gets answered. So if you don't see like kind of the subject matter roughly of your question here, one thing that you can find out is you can also, please feel free to ask your question, either you can come off audio to do it, or you can put it in the Zoom chat, but just understand that you have the ability to drive today's conversation. So if you want more detail on something, let us know. If we're asking one of your questions and we're kind of approaching it from a different angle than what you intended, tell us that, give us some more context for your question, or let us know, hey, that's not really what I was getting at. We really want to make sure that, that you all have a great and productive time today during this Chat and Learn event. So like I said, we're going to talk a little bit about how to think strategically about your next role. We're going to talk about some ways that you can manage boundaries, which I know is, personally, it's difficult for me, so I imagine a lot of other people deal with it as well. Kind of managing those boundaries at work and at home so that you have balance there. And then we're also going to talk a bit about, hold on, my thing's in front of my screen, some ways to showcase your goals and previous work so that you are not limiting yourself and you're kind of opening yourself up to as many career opportunities as you can. So let's dive into the questions today. I know we had a lot of them, so we're going to try and get through as many as possible. But one of the first questions, and one of the questions we were asked a lot, people wanted to know what challenges your latest transition presented. So can you talk a little bit about what your most recent transition was, and what was the biggest challenge or the biggest hurdle during that shift?
Sure. So I took up my current position as global head of Moody's ESG solutions it was March 23rd, and I think the world went to lockdown approximately March 20th.
Oh my God.
So I was literally flying around to try and meet as many people as possible when the initial appointment announcement came out. And then I've been working the whole time over Zoom. Okay. So pandemic was a super big challenge. But let's set the pandemic aside. Moody's ESG Solutions is a big strategic initiative for the corporation. It's an incredibly important mission, I think, for the global capital markets and for everybody, I would argue, in the world. But we're pursuing the advancement of the Sustainable Finance Action Plan, which is really trying to address climate change. It's trying to address social and racial inequality, and it's trying to change the ethos under which companies operate. When I started out as a banker 30 years ago, everything was about shareholder value and profit, and really now we're trying to get everybody to think about multi-stakeholder impact. So trying to lead this business, which is a global business, trying to come up a learning curve in an area where I haven't historically had expertise, and trying to orient a global team of over 500 people that's going to grow to 1,000 toward common objectives has been probably one of the most challenging things I've ever done. It's been fun, but it's required real personal and professional resilience. So it's good to know that after 30 years you haven't seen it all.
That is really cool, and I love the distinction of like, look, yeah, the pandemic obviously impacted this, but there's going to be kind of, I don't want to say snags, but there's going to be things that happen along the way and difficulties that can either hinder or affect that kind of transition. So I love that you kind of not only acknowledge the pandemic, but also kind of illustrated a little bit more clearly the fact that these things come up all the time. It's not just pandemic, it's not just the pandemic, like, kind of throwing wrenches into
I think the pandemic is a pretty exceptional one, but you never want to wait for a crisis. And yeah. So you have to persevere, and you just have to figure it out. And so it just becomes one of the many variables that you're addressing as you move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So one of the other questions that we were asked, this person wrote in saying, knowing that you have 30 plus years of experience, which shift has had the greatest impact on those who report to you, your followers, or the organization as a whole? And I think this is really interesting because, it doesn't obviously have to just apply to Moody's, but I thought this was a really good question. So what shift has really had that large impact?
A large impact on me or a large impact on the organization?
I would say both. I would say if there's, especially if they're two separate ones, have you made a shift that really had like the biggest impact on your career or like the direction of your work journey? Or really is it more like a shift that really impacted, like the organization that you joined or the team that you moved to or the changes that impacted that team?
Sure. Okay. So in terms of the things that gave me moments of aha, there are many throughout the course of my career. I think there's the when you're getting started and you're quite scared and quite confused and just absorbing like crazy. And I don't know that is the biggest impact. It's got a big impact on you individually because you're just learning the basics of how do I turn up? How do I keep going? How do I deliver? How do I engage in an environment that isn't something that we learn in school or in our personal lives particularly? The next big shift I noticed came around the age of around 36. And I don't think numerically is really the point, but it was the point at which I'd done really well up until then, but it was the point at which I knew I really knew what I was doing. So it was just for me, a different level of competence and confidence in my competence. Okay. In terms of the period where I think I had the greatest impact on the company, there was my own company, and I think we're going to talk about that around some other questions. And just making that a success and understanding what was doable and what wasn't. But in terms of my roles at Moody's, I think it was becoming the leader of the research, data, and analytics business and deciding that we were going to transform it and doing it systematically over an extremely long period of time without ever becoming complacent.
Okay.
I'm assuming that in my current role, I'm going to have a lot of impact, but I can't tell you whether it's going to be good or bad at this point, but I'm hoping it's really good.
I love that. I think you're right. It's one of those things where I feel like when you're in the middle of it, it can feel like, oh, this is huge. But then when you start to look back on it, you're like, no, there's been bigger things. And I love the idea of kind of coming into something and, like you said, kind of maintaining that momentum, because not all changes happen rapidly. A lot of them require a lot of slogging through and a lot of hard work to start to see results on it, or even to like get the ball of change moving. So I absolutely love that. Thank you. All right. So we talked a little bit about kind of the single biggest shift in your career, but do you feel that you like successfully navigated it, or do you feel that it taught you kind of how not to respond or how not to handle shifts in the future?
Okay, so that's a very interesting question. So I was at an event, and they had a woman there presenting on career paths for women executives. And she stood up and she described my career path almost to a T. And I just thought it was so funny because I thought I was disorganized. I thought I was unique and exceptional. And I thought I was making it up as I go along. All of those things may be true. But the fact of the matter is that every career path is different. And you have to understand where you are in the moment and what your own circumstances are and what skills you bring to bear or what skills you could bring to bear and what the people you're working for need or what you think you could contribute to someone you're not working for, but you want to. And the important thing is to realize that it's constantly evolving and you can influence the direction it takes and that you don't let opportunities pass you by. I have 3 kids, they're all grown-ups now. And I used to say to them, do you think you see people around you who are lucky? And they would go, yeah, so-and-so is really lucky. And I said, okay, nobody's lucky. Some people just take advantage of the opportunities as they pass by them. And you think those people are lucky. So you can be as lucky as anybody around you. You just need to recognize the luck as it's passing by and grab it. Because if it passes you by, you'll disregard it as luck.
I've seriously said, I sit through at least 3 of these a week. And there's always a moment in the chats where no matter what it is, doesn't matter if I've heard the subject 100 times, there's always a mind blown moment. And I love that explanation, because I also don't believe in luck, mostly because it's not real. It's not a thing. Maybe it's nihilist, but I just don't think it's a thing. So I love that kind of better explanation of, it's not luck, it's taking advantage of those things. Like would you say that like it requires some amount of whatever the opposite of risk averseness is, like, does it require, to your opinion, kind of like a risk-taking attitude? Or do you think it's more about kind of being able to like assess things realistically in the moment, like really accurately perceive what this opportunity is?
I think it's a combination of being energetic, having drive and initiative, and giving things a go. So you don't have to abandon what you're doing. So it doesn't require being a risk taker, but you have to be willing to explore. And then if things are offered to you, you can think about them in a negative context, or you can think about them in a, what could I do with this context? And so it may be forcing yourself. And I wouldn't call myself a glass half full person. I'd probably say I'm the it the glass can be half full or half empty, but looking at what the possibilities are and deciding that if there is an opportunity, that you're the person who can do it.
I like that. I think thinking about it, I probably very much agree with you there. I'm also not really a glass half full person, but it's more of like, okay, what can we do with what we're given? Like, let's realistically assess what resources are there and what, what our abilities, all the tools in our toolkit, all that kind of stuff. Let's be realistic and not, aspirational about those. But then then let's think about what we can do with that. It's kind of the lemons to lemonade sort of thing. But then it's also like, well, I mean, if you don't want lemonade, maybe you just want lemon zest. So, right. Okay, here, you got plenty of that too. Yeah, I really like that. Thank you so much for sharing this. This is like, this conversation is going in kind of like a really philosophical direction that I wasn't anticipating, but I love it. So thank you for that. Okay. So what a lot of people had questions about, basically possibilities when it comes to these career changes. This person wanted to know if it's possible to change careers at any time, regardless of age, industry, or experience. Now, obviously, there's 1,000 different answers to this question based on the specifics of each person. But do you feel like there's a certain, maybe like a specific industry that to your experience, doesn't really, facilitate these changes, or a certain level of experience where it's not really possible, or, even age, which I hate that this is even a topic we're still talking about, but it absolutely does need to be talked about.
Yeah, I remember reading this question and thinking, gosh, how will I answer that? Okay, so truth be told, it's easier to change up when you're younger, without a doubt. Okay.
Do you think that's the energy thing?
It's no, not exclusively. I think part of it is the receptivity of the people who might be taking you on, if it's in an employment context, and the runway that you have for learning and coming up to speed. Having said that, I switched up a number of times. I started out in the pharmaceutical industry, and then I ended up in finance. And in finance, I changed up a number of times. And moving into Moody's was a move away from traditional banking. And I did that consistently, sort of every 7 years. It always had sort of, definitely not the pharmaceutical. Pharmaceutical had nothing to do with it. But I did use it by analyzing pharmaceutical companies. So okay. There's a connection there. I know people who at the age of 50 have gone off and gotten their PhDs and now are doing genetics. I know people who what we would call mid-career, so late 30s, early 40s, switched from finance and became very famous news presenters. Okay.
Wow.
I know people who take a discipline, and that's kind of what I did with the move to Moody's. So I had been a traditional banker. I had realized that within the banking industry, they didn't have a very disciplined product management culture. And so I started to develop that discipline within bank organizations, and then saw the Moody's ad, and what they needed was the product strategy, product management discipline, but I'd never done fixed income. I'd done cash, I'd done FX, I'd done securities finance, but I'd never done fixed income. So I went in on the basis that I can bring really good product strategy and business management discipline in, but I don't have this other stuff. And they're like, okay, I'll figure it out. So you can easily move industries in a common discipline. And we hire a lot of people who don't have any finance background, but they come in because I think just one of the recent additions to my team comes from the airline industry, right? Particularly if you're doing data science or if you're doing marketing or if you're doing finance. I mean, it's all the same stuff. It's just in a different industry and you can learn that. So, I mean, I think there's plenty of opportunity to do it. But again, you have to be lucky. You have to see the opportunity passing before your eyes and you have to grab it. And you have to have the energy perhaps to realize it's going to be a pretty steep learning curve, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So that actually dovetails really nicely into our next question, which is asking about how you can identify those transferable skills. Because it sounds like what you did was not only leverage the skills that you had to kind of to assess new, potential companies and that kind of thing, but you already knew that those skills, like that you had those skills and like how to make them applicable to what you were trying to do. If people are still kind of at that step one of like trying to figure out what those transferable skills are there any methods that you really recommend for helping to kind of get started in that and start identifying what skills might be transferable?
Right. I mean, yes. If you are already in employment, you can go to your manager or mentor or colleagues and say, what do you think I'm really good at? And people will often tell you, you've got great communication skills. Oh, you're really good at pulling people together. You're a really good collaborator. You're super proactive, right? You're very data driven. Your attention to detail is incredible, right? So you start to elicit from other people what their impressions of you are, and you go, I hadn't really thought of that, because probably what you think isn't what others around you observe, and you're probably harder on yourself than others will be, because you're, I mean, at least in my case, I'm constantly self-criticizing. But I think that's a really great place to start. There are consulting groups out there that will help you do it. There are a lot of psychometric tests that you can do that tell you your personality and your character type. So I think there are a number of different techniques, but I think that the best one is to find people who know you and work with you and just ask them what they think. And that's going to start you down the path. And then there's going to be the things that make you passionate and the things that you're super keen on and the things that you find yourself reading about all the time in your spare time that might be a good direction to head in from a career perspective.
I love that. And you're right. It's one of those things where getting that, you can take, online quizzes and stuff, but we are our own like harshest critic almost unilaterally. And so I love that idea of talking to like kind of getting that outside perspective, that third person perspective. And you're right. Like, this is an important thing. And it kind of feels like, at least personally, I feel a little bit awkward, like asking that of someone, but you're right. It's incredibly valuable because you're getting an outside opinion, and that's hopefully unbiased, from someone who's seen you in that work capacity. And so that, it's a lot maybe more trustworthy than, say, like asking your bestie or your parents or, whatever. Like asking those people is going to maybe lead to something that's a little more flattering, but maybe not as true. But I mean, you could also take that flattering answer and then be like, yeah, I am really good at blah, blah, blah. And then that confidence helps increase your skills in that area, or helps you at least increase your willingness to reach.
The only thing I would be mindful of is that if you go to people who are nice, they might sugarcoat. So you want to find people that will be honest. They may not be tactful, so don't let your feelings get hurt. But a really good marketing technique, and this is just professional discipline, this has nothing to do with, this does have something to do with what we're talking about, but it's a different topic, in marketing, you have to get a sample so that you start to see an observable trend. So I would ask a cross section of people and try and keep the question consistent, or the collection of questions consistent, to see whether a pattern emerges in the feedback you're getting.
I like that idea of looking at it a little more analytically and not just saying like, well, this one person said I'm good at it, so it must be true. Like, you're right. That's a really good thing to kind of keep in mind. And please feel free to share with us in the chat thread if any of y'all have identified some of your transferable skills, what those might be. Please feel free to share that with us. Now, Andrea, just as a personal question before we jump to the next one, when you were coming out of pharmaceuticals, when you were going into pharmaceuticals, I'm sorry, do you think that being in finance was like really informed and was a very like a multi-tool kind of thing? Like, it really set you up for, having the skills that you needed to really assess these things? Or do you think it was, again, one of those things where you're kind of like just making do with what you have, and having maybe different skills would have been more helpful, but hindsight's always 2020, blah, blah, blah. Do you think it was a situation where you really had that great opportunity and it was a great fit? Or do you think it was something that you consciously like made work?
Do you mean to go into finance?
Yeah, your large transition from pharmaceuticals to finance. Or no, wait,
okay.
Do I have that
so
backwards?
I have to confess.
Okay.
I went into pharmaceutical because what I was told when I was doing my undergrad, and I'm Canadian, and Canadians are always told you must get a master's degree in order to be useful to anybody, at least in my day. And so I was told, as I came out of my undergrad in political philosophy and Eastern communist systems, just before the Berlin Wall fell,
Side note, that's a fascinating major, and I just want to have another chat exclusively on that. So we'll put a pin in that one. But okay. So right as the Cold War ended,
ready for the working world. And
you're talking to someone with an art history degree, okay? I am right there along with you. It is mint condition, never been used.
And so I had been told that before you did an MBA, which is what was my plan, you needed sales experience. Sales experience was going to be the very best thing you could do. And so I went into the pharmaceutical industry, and I was probably the first arts graduate they'd taken, and they were very skeptical because you had to pass your pharmaceutical accreditation exams, which are largely science-based. So I thought, okay. And my plan was to do it for 2 years because that's what I was told you were supposed to do. And weirdly, and I do recognize this is weird, from about the age of 16, I had always thought I was going to go into finance. And in fact, I thought I'd go into international finance and that I would set up my own consulting firm, which I eventually did, and then didn't anymore. But my objective was very clear. And I literally stayed and gave my notice as soon as I passed my accreditation exams. And I'd been there for 18 months and learned how to do the Xerox professional sales technique. And it served me incredibly well throughout my career. I mean, whoever gave me that advice was spot on. And then I went and did my MBA. And then coming out of my MBA, you had to do work experience between years. And the only reason I ended up in banking is because there were jobs posted on the university board. And one of them was with Manufacturers Hanover, who I'm sure most of you are too young to even remember. And the amount they paid was enough for me to self-fund my summer in London because I was at university in the UK. And that's how I ended up doing banking. Because I had no idea what any of it meant.
Yeah. I mean, I would say a leap like that is probably true for a lot of us, especially, like I graduated in 2008 and was just with my, bright, shiny art history degree and terrible, terrible job market. So like I think there's a lot of people that have a very weird work history based a lot on the fact that you do what you gotta.
Well, and you can find benefit in all of it, right?
Yeah.
So on the MBA as my internship, I did this summer course and then used that and applied to a couple of banks and applied to the finance departments of a lot of large corporates and ended up going into banking and have never regretted it. It was a really interesting
Yeah.
career path.
And whoever gave you that sales advice, that's really interesting, because it kind of it sort of sounds a little bit like the Graduate, about like everybody just go into plastics. You want to be plastics is the future. But you're right. I mean, like, sales is incredibly applicable, because even just in the job hunt alone, you are selling yourself. You're selling yourself to another organization. You're trying to tell them why you'd be a good fit, why you should be the one they pick. So I think that's really great. I love the kind of like reframing of that. We had a lot of questions from people wanting to know how to show that their various unrelated experience was relevant and valuable instead of being a liability or a deterrent to getting hired. Did you have any experience with that when you were, making these shifts in your career, or did you like maybe see other people having to try and try and navigate that field while in the hiring process?
Yes, I didn't. Well, I may have, but I turned them into features.
Okay, it's a feature, not a bug.
Yeah, yes, and so I mean, I've interviewed people who've gone off and done what I regard as super interesting things, and I I have a lot of respect for people who give things a try and get there, and sometimes they don't like it. They think, oh my God, this would be awesome. And then they get there and go, oh my God, I'm bored, rigid. And what I really want to do is. So I think if it's something you do that you don't like, it may be the way that you discovered what you do like. If you got there and like it well enough, but it's not serving your personal circumstances, I think that's fine too. But regardless, anything that you do, there are things you learned while you were doing them. Even, I used to run career advice programs for my daughter's high school class. And they would say, oh, they would say, oh, I work in a cafe. I'm like, no, you work in a cafe, right? And we talk about, what do you need? What have you learned while you're working in a cafe? You've learned to be organized. You've learned to multitask. You've learned to prioritize. You've learned, right? So there's always something you've learned. And I think no matter how you feel about the experience personally, because it may have been a really low point for you in terms of what you did, and you may sort of say to yourself, what were you thinking, you fool? But not in front of the prospective employer. In front of the prospective employer, it is the best thing you ever did because you discovered X, Y, and Z, right?
Yeah. No, I completely, that seriously, I feel that hard. I mean, I've got years of waitressing and bartending and nannying experience that was not at all my favorite jobs ever. But, customer service is kind of like sales in that it gives you a lot of skills. A lot. And yeah, you smell like French fry grease, but you're also getting a lot of skills that, you can't take a quick training on and really equate it to the kind of like hands-on learning opportunities that you get when, you've got somebody screaming in your face about something that's not at all your fault, but you still have to make it okay. These are very valuable skills to have. All right. So let's talk about, when you realize that you need to gain more skills for your career climb. How do you strategically gain the skills that you're going to need for your next role while you're balancing the demands and needs of your current job? Because I feel like, especially when this is hard enough when you're just trying to climb in a straight line along the same path, whatever, and it seems a little bit more traditional and straightforward. But it seems like this would be even more difficult if you're looking at making a big shift or a change. So how did you do this?
Well, I think it depends on how big a shift you're trying to make. If it's anything related to the current company, you're in, doesn't need to be the same role, can be the company. I see nothing wrong with going to the company and seeking sponsorship. And that might be for language skills because you work at an international company. It might be for analytical skills because you're currently in marketing, but you want to move more into analytical disciplines. It can be the other way around. Again, I think it's about being creative and making a case. If it's something completely different, and even if it's something related, I think the most important thing is to be open and transparent with the people you're working with about what you're doing and what that means in terms of how you need to organize to get your job done, right? Because people will have become accustomed to you working in one way, and now you're working in another way. And that doesn't just apply to acquiring new skills. I mean, we've had people working for us before who go off and do a part-time MBA that we're paying for. So we know they're doing it. I don't know that enough of them come in and proactively say, here's what the workload is. Here's how I plan on tackling it. Here's how I want to adjust what you've become accustomed to me doing.
Yeah.
Is that okay? Right? And I think that becomes relevant for anything that's mandating a really big shift in how you operate. And that can be at any stage of life. It can be because you've got a kid who's just been selected for an Olympic squad. It can be because you've got a parent who needs more caring. It can be because you just had your first or second baby. It can be because you're going back to school. It can be because you yourself are an incredible athlete and you've been selected to pursue something, or you got a part in an amazing play. I mean, it can be any kind of thing.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be like a qualifying life event. Like you could just be having a paradigm shift. It could be just something that you've changed.
It can be something you're committed to, something you want to pursue, right?
Yeah.
And normally a company will be supportive of that as long as you think about the two-way give and get.
Yeah. Like what else can they get from you by doing this? Like what's the benefit in it for them? I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so we only have about 15 minutes left in today's chat, and I know we wanted to leave a little bit of time at the end to talk some more about Moody's company culture, some of the open roles y'all have. So I'm going to try and get to a couple more questions before we run out of time. But if y'all are on today's chat and you have questions you want to ask, please make sure you do that before time runs out. You're more than welcome to interrupt me. Just try not to interrupt our speaker or another guest in case you do come off mute to ask. All right, so this person had written in asking, how do I ensure that I don't become stagnant in pursuing my career goals? How often should we change roles in order to maintain our relevance in the workforce?
I think it changes over time. So when you're first starting out in your career, I see no harm in looking at sort of a 2 to 3 year time frame for a switch. And you can do a couple. I mean, if you think about it, you can probably do that 3 times because that gets you through a 10-year, 8 to 10 span, right?
Mm-hmm.
You want to make sure you give enough time to the role you're in to gain the skills and experience that the role has to offer without becoming bored. So it's not to say that the assignment that you get at the outset is the assignment that you end with, because you can be gathering more responsibility the whole time. So again, being open and honest. Do you have capacity? Is there a project? Can you see an initiative kicking off that you'd love to get involved with that makes you look like someone who's prepared to engage and step up without looking flighty, right? So you need to know that you're managing to your existing commitments. And if you see something else that you want to do that you think you're particularly suited for or is particularly attractive, and you've been meeting your current commitments for a while, you may want to go in and say, I've had an idea. I've got so-and-so who's working with me on this, who I think can take it over now. And I would really love the opportunity to do X. So it's like anything where you don't put your needs, you foster shared objectives, right? I'd really love to do this. It would be something that I would find really motivating, and it looks like it's something that's really important to the company. And I've thought about it, and one way of organizing, and the individual you're talking to may go, no, you know what? I think you'd be great for that role. I'm not sure the way you're thinking about it is what I might do, because they've been thinking about something else. But at least you're walking in with something that looks like you're proactive and you're being considerate and you're thinking through the implications of the shift.
Okay. No, I like that. Okay, we did get a question in the Zoom chat, so I am going to raise that one. So apologies for catching you off guard with this. This person said, I acquired a master's degree and then accepted a position where I wasn't able to use it due to a horrible boss and work environment. Now, 5 years later, the analytics market is saturated, and because of the pandemic and the availability of new and relatively inexpensive college degrees, employers are requiring more skills for much less pay. My being over 50 has also been a deterrent to my reemployment. What can I do to get back to work after a year of unemployment without a significant reduction in pay or affecting my future promotability? So I think this speaks a lot to what you were talking about kind of taking bugs and making them features. But is there a specific way that you would spin this if you were in this person's shoes?
If you've been out for a year, but you've been actively applying for roles that you think you're qualified for, you may, and I'm assuming by the nature of the question, the roles that you're qualified for aren't for the money that you need in order to be comfortable.
Yeah.
So you may want to think about alternative industries that may pay more. Because if you're in an industrial sector, it may not pay as much as a financial sector, for example. You may want to think about rapidly growing sectors where demand is higher. And the other thing you might want to do is think about the level you're applying at, because if you're 50, you may have a lot of managerial skills, and maybe what you're applying for is too junior, which is why the money isn't there. Or you go in confident that you're going to prove yourself and that you think you can drive your salary up. So, I mean, certainly when I went from being self-employed to being full-time in a company again, I went in at a pay level that wasn't as high as what I was earning with my own company, at probably a title level that was not what it should have been. And then I went up like that. Right? And I didn't really go in thinking that's my plan. I went in thinking this looks like an interesting opportunity, and then worked it.
Yeah. I like that. Now, do you think that it would be relatively, I don't want to say an easy spin, but I kind of loved how when you were talking about it, you were already reframing this idea of like, well, maybe you're already kind of lowballing yourself. Is there anything like, do you think that spin or that attitude of like, let's see how we can make this into a positive? Do you think that really strongly depends on, what other transferable skills you can pull out in addition to these things? Or do you think it's really just about putting the right spin on what is there in your resume?
I mean, it depends on what you're applying for. So it may. I know in technology that they're constantly training on new languages.
Yeah.
In analytics, it depends on which analytical techniques you've got, whether it's financial or whether it's predictive or whether it's big data, right? It can depend. So it depends. And if you do need to retrain, you may need to retrain. And then you may want to look for an organization that offers great training.
Yeah, that is a good one. And that's also a really great question to ask in interviews is like, what does your mentorship program look like? What does your continuing education look like? Because when you're in these interviews, you're interviewing the company just as much as they're interviewing you, which I think is
Right.
something that gets lost in the shuffle real quick since the power dynamic is obviously not really equal.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's a good point there. Um, okay. So a lot of people had questions about that work-life balance kind of thing and setting those boundaries. One person wrote in saying, how do I balance my ambition for professional growth with my personal life? As years go by, I feel the need to put more time and effort into my work, but I'm afraid my colleagues and managers will consider me obsolete. So I think this is interesting when it comes to, like you said, like kind of those big life changes, but it also just might be where you have hobbies you'd like to pursue or work is stressful. And so you need that downtime. So if you were, trying to, like, what was it like for you when you were trying to start this balance or to set up those boundaries to help you maintain it?
Okay, so in my personal circumstances, the reason for balance came because I had 3 kids in 5 years,
Okay.
right? So I started to feel like I wasn't being a good parent and I wasn't being a good professional, and I figured something had to give. Now, when I was at that stage, there was no such thing as flexibility at work.
Yeah.
So I went down a different path. I self-employed. Today, however, you can ask for flexibility, and most companies are going to accommodate you. And then all you need to do is you need to think about what does flexibility look like for you and what do you really need and how can you make your situation work. Once you've got your flexibility, and I learned this lesson in hindsight because I incorporated, I became my own company and I decided I would work 3 days a week, but then it always bled. So
Okay.
the way I managed that was I priced for it to dissuade the people I worked for from trying to get more. Because if you go 4 days a week, and this is in any flexible arrangement, you'll find yourself working 5. So a lot of women with little kids, for example, will go 3. You need to think about pulling yourself out of the line. You can't, it's hard to be customer facing because customer wins every time.
Yeah.
And so you need to think about what does it mean? And then what I found was a really effective strategy was really compartmentalizing and not shortchanging on the childcare. So I think a lot of people think, oh, okay, I'm going part-time, I can do the childcare 2 days a week. The problem with that is that you're doing it that way because you want to spend time with your kids, you want to spend time doing what you're doing. And if you then decide that you're going to be frontline housekeeper, frontline childcare, the time you're spending is doing laundry, doing the dishes, preparing food, right?
Yeah.
And so you need to think about everything that needs to get done and how you're going to make that work. Now, financially, that isn't necessarily available to everybody. And an interesting fun fact that I have for people is there were many years where I was just about breaking even on my childcare.
Yeah.
And I'd done the maths. I'm financial. And I'd done the maths. And it was worth it to me to say, okay, it's gonna be flat because you're not taking account of your earning power as you go forward by keeping in.
Yeah.
Right. So you've got to figure out whether it's for children or whether it's for a different interest that you have, or whether it's for some other driver that's making you not want to spend 100% of your time working. And I never think that's healthy anyway.
Oh yeah, for sure.
How much time do I need for what I want to do? And how do I set it up so that I'm doing what I want to do in that time? And if what you want to do is spend more time with your kids, then you need the childcare to be doing all the other stuff, not for you to be doing all the laundry so the other person can run them around to their events and watch your kids grow up, right? So you just have to think about it very practically and prepare for what you need to do.
Yeah. And I like that idea, like, kind of getting down to where do your priorities really lie, and what you want it to look like. Because I feel like while to a certain extent, the idea of how something's going to turn out can sometimes rob us of the enjoyment of how it actually does turn out. But you're right. You do need to kind of look realistically at like, well, what do I want to accomplish? What am I trying to do here? So I think that's really great. And thank you for highlighting that, because I feel like flexibility is much more an option for a lot of people today, but it's also not an option for a lot of people still. So I think that's a really important thing to highlight. All right, so we are almost out of time today. This always goes way faster than you think it's going to. So I want to make sure we talk a little bit more about Moody's. Now, the screen I'm sharing with you is some questions that we had asked and posed to Andrea prior to today's session. So one of the things I want to talk a little bit about is your top tips, because the company culture and the favorite part about working at Moody's, not to put a bad spin on it, but like these are really common things, right? People want to work with good people because you spend a ton of time with them. Having a collaborative culture is really important for a lot of different business facets, not just, because it makes everybody feel like a team. So when you talk about interviewing, I really like the idea of trying to, obviously relaxing would be very hard, but why don't you tell us a little bit about why you picked these things as your top tips for interviewing? And are they for Moody's in particular, or are they just in general?
I would say they're in general, but it does work at Moody's. So if you're asked a question, you don't need to answer straight away. You can pause and organize your thoughts. And then you can adapt the question if you don't feel comfortable with exactly that question.
Mm-hmm.
And then you just want to talk about the experience you've had in a way that addresses the thing that you can probably tell the interviewer is looking for, right?
Okay.
So if it's a typical question like, did you ever have a situation where things weren't going well for you? Like you weren't getting done what you had hoped to get done, and how did you, what was...
No, I've never experienced that before, everything. Oh, God.
And what was the root cause and how did you address it? You want to, if you kind of pause, you will have pre-prepared, right? You tell
Mm-hmm.
a little story, you talk about your observations, and then you talk about the learnings.
Mm-hmm.
You're just going to end up in a conversation with the person, which is always so much easier than the really nervous answers to really quick questions.
Yeah. I love that idea of seeing it more like a conversation and less like an interview firing squad situation, because that always feels like there's time pressures on it. But yeah, I like that idea. I love that kind of different perspective of like, okay, just relax and talk to the person. You're the one, granted, they're the one asking questions, but you can really control where the conversation goes by kind of reframing the questions that they're asking.
Well, and one free tip. If at the end of an interview, and a good interview, the person will always say, do you have any questions for me? Even if you've spoken to 5, 10, 20 people at the company, do not say, no, I think all my questions have been answered.
Mm-hmm.
Regurgitate a question. The interviewers are not getting together saying, what question did they ask you? But if you are not curious and you do not wonder if you're not, okay, going back to my market research question, if you're not just checking a fact that you got, you've wasted an opportunity.
Yeah.
I always wonder when people go, no, I think all my questions have been answered. I'm like, really? Doesn't mean
I always take like, I
don't
used to make
hire
a rule,
them, but it's an easy win.
Yes. I always took at least 2 questions, like back pocket questions, into interviews. And one of them was always more like business minded, like, are you guys expanding into this area? Or I'm interested to hear more about, this department, blah, blah. And then the other one was more of like a fun question, if I felt like I needed to like lighten the mood, or if my real question was already answered. And then I would ask something about like, well, what's your employee's favorite day of the year? What's the best, what's a perk that nobody really talks about at your company, but people should know about? what, I tried to ask something that like allows for a positive answer for them, but also would kind of give me more of an insight into like, well, what is it actually like to work here? Because nobody's a robot. So like, is this a fun place, or is it, really regimented, or, try and kind of peel back some of the layers there. All right. So I hope we're not running over on time. I see we are at time. So apologies if y'all have to jump, but we will obviously be sending out the recording. I know that you, as well as your coworker Donna, are on the line to talk some more about Moody's open roles. Are there any one of these that really stands out that you'd like to speak on, or do you want to just share with us in like a high level of like, here's where our openings are. So if you are at all related to this subject, come check us out. What would you like to share with the audience before we jump about what Moody's needs right now?
Sure. So, and Andrea, more than happy to have you jump in on any of these, but these are just a few hot jobs that we are actively recruiting for now. I will say, if you are interested in Moody's, and particularly in Andrea's organization, Moody's ESG Solutions, we have over 80 open positions right now, and we will continue to grow. So please do find us on Power to Fly. You could also go to our career site and search for ESG Solutions roles, and you could find them in a number of different areas at a number of different levels. So definitely encourage you to go find us if you're interested in these roles or any similar.
Yes, thank you. And I just saw that my colleague just put the links to all of these roles that'll lead you right back to the Power to Fly job pages for them. But I'm also sharing the link for the main Moody's Corporation page as well. So that way you can check those out. Justine actually asked if roles are remote eligible. Is that like in the job description somewhere, or like clearly you can see?
We do for certain roles and for certain specialties. So definitely. And we have a very good flexibility policy anyway. So definitely. If there's something you're interested in, apply. And if you need to do it remotely for some reason, inquire. And it may or may not work.
Awesome. Thank you all both so much. So apologies if I've put you off your schedule the rest of the day, but I just want to say a huge thank you to you, Andrea, as well as Donna, to you. The prep work that goes into these sessions that the audience gets to see is always way more than just the hour you spend with us. So I want to say a huge thank you to you for taking time to share with us and just help our community to better understand your career journey and a little bit more about Moody's.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for including us.
Anytime. I want to say a huge thank you to our guests as well. Y'all submitted some amazing questions prior to this session. So it was really great to get to learn some more about the amazing questions that you had asked. I just want to say welcome to anyone who maybe hadn't joined us before. Hopefully we will see you join us on many more chats in the future. If you are a returner, thank you so much for sticking with us. And I hope that same thing, we get to see more of our community members join us. Don't forget, I shared the link to Moody's company page, but also don't forget to sign up if you are shifting your careers or pivoting, or if you're just new to the working world. Our September summit is from the 20th to the 23rd. And the whole focus of the job summit, or of that summit, is pivoting careers, mid-career transitions, and new people, like new workers. So please feel free to take advantage of that. It's a free event. We would love to have you. Don't forget to check out Moody's company page. And yeah, hopefully y'all have an excellent rest of your Thursday, and we'll see you soon on more upcoming chats. Thanks so much. And I hope y'all have a great day. Bye.